if the currency for change is loss and you've already paid that price, what happens when people just don't grow? Like, is that not just such a shame then? If you've already had to pay the price of losing something, and instead of getting something out of it and growing in some capacity, you fixate on the loss and don't necessarily experience positive change, which is the silver lining that can come along with loss. Welcome back to the Prometheus podcast. I'm here with Luke and Hendry as always. And today's topic is a little different compared to usual, but I think it's still, something that's definitely worth talking about. And that's the relationship between change and loss. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times in life, you can't really change and become something new without having to lose a part of your identity or lose a core part of what was your life in order to become, the person you need to be. And I think a lot of us fear that process. We fear having to sacrifice something that we used to have because we get comfortable with just the status quo of what our life was. And change is always a kind of disruptive process because it kind of makes us feel anxious and it makes us feel like we're not in control anymore because we necessarily don't change ourselves. The world often changes us. So how do we navigate that situation?
That was far.
I was like, oh, okay. Go on, boys. Let me explain the topic. But yeah, how do we navigate this situation, and how do we, feel comfortable resigning ourselves to this process of loss and change?
Well, I think first, let's just take a loss for an example. And as you're bringing up the topic, I'll handle a lot back to you. So, for loss, describe us then loss, because it's multi-dimension, right? It could be, like you're saying, it's part of you. You could lose part of your identity. You could go through something traumatic maybe, and then you've lost part of yourself, but losing part of yourself then makes you find a part of who you were meant to be or who you're going to be. So everything like that. So what's your quick, description of what it could be? Because I know there's multiple different angles of loss. So what's in your mind right now?
So as we've said, loss can be any number of things. So loss can be a person in your life who you thought was just going to be there for you just took them for granted that they were just going to be there, and then they leave your life. It could be a job you had, a position you had that suddenly you get fired, and then you're kind of reeling, trying to understand, well, I've been in this job for so long now, what am I? It just could be difficult life circumstances. Maybe you were going to university, but since someone's got sick at home, you've had to fall back into more of a carer role, and you can't live your life that you were, that trajectory that you were on. You thought you were going to have all these things. And I guess what the common theme is expectation, right? We kind of have an attachment to an expectation of what our life's going to be in the future. But of course, life turns on a dime, and then one day, what you thought your life was going to be can be completely, the rug can just be pulled out from underneath you. So loss can be any number of things. There's no specific definition for what loss is. Loss is just anything that robs, the future we had envisioned and presents us with something we didn't expect.
Yeah, and I love how you're saying kind of that pull the rug under you, right? Because then that's what comes into that second part that you're talking about, which is change. But you can't change, you can't grow if you haven't dealt with that loss, because it is inevitable, like you're saying. If that stuff happens, we can't control it. And yes, you can plan what your future looks like, but if you're then not kind of prepared or accepting of the way the universe works in a sense, and when that loss happens, if you can't kind of wrap your head around that and process it, then you can't get to that next stage, which is like you're saying, you can't, yes, you lose things, but you often find yourself through that loss. But people can't go through that process because they don't deal with that loss at the start. And that's, I guess, why I wanted you to kind of describe it in all of its layers, because that happens and that's every day. And it's only how you process it and deal with it that allows you to even kind of grow in the first place. Because a lot of people, they stay stagnant in that one trauma. They just kind of get addicted in the sense of that circumstance or the fire. It just becomes their whole life, and it's just like, well, I can't move forward, I can't change because I refuse to accept that I've lost something and I can't get that back. Right. But just because you can't get that back, that doesn't mean you can't find something else in that chaos.
Yeah. And one thing I'll throw to you, Hendry, is, well, in my mind and the way that I try to think about loss and change is that, well, when the world is presenting you with an unforeseen circumstance, something that you weren't expecting but something you have to live with now, as Luke was just saying, you can get caught up in the loss and not necessarily grow out of it. But either way, like, if the currency for change is loss and you've already paid that price, what happens when, you know, people just don't grow? Like, is that not just such a shame then, if you've already had to pay the price of losing something, and instead of getting something out of it and growing in some capacity, you know, you fixate on the loss and don't necessarily experience positive change, which is the silver lining that can come along with loss?
I think for most people, I think everyone kind of dwells on the loss and feels sorry for themselves instead of accepting what actually really happened. And it's maybe because they don't want to come to terms with it or not. But there's me personally with experiencing kind of like traumatic things in my life. There was two pathways I thought I could have went, and the first one was to kind of just be like, feel sorry for myself and just kind of hate life and kind of just like, oh, this is it, like, you know, like this is what life is thrown at me. Or the one that I have gone is, hey, this is how it, you know, life has played out, but it's not the end.
Right.
And there's plenty of more opportunities, and you know, we can move forward from it. You learn to like live with it, but not dwell on it, I guess. I think if that kind of answers your question, really. So like for me personally, it was to, hey, like I've lost this person in my life, but I can't really kind of live on this factor forever, because I still have my whole life ahead of me to live, and I should use this as the kind of like guidance of, hey, don't take life for granted, because it can be really short at times. So just live it out, do what makes you happy, and kind of create a positive impact in the world.
So it reminds me of this Chinese proverb. It goes, when the winds of change blow, some people build walls, but some people build windmills. And it's all about how, of course, like you're saying, you can process loss certain ways. You can choose to live there and only, like you're saying, dwell on that specific scenario, and you can't kind of move forward, or you use it as, okay, this has happened, and yes, it sucks, but it is what it is. Now I got to use that loss and use that kind of change, build a windmill around it, and go, like you're saying, well, this is why I can't take life for granted, because this could happen. So that's one way of looking at it, where of course another way is just saying, oh, this has happened, this has crippled me, and now I can't actually accept what has happened to then move forward to what could happen in the future.
I guess, like the situations that like are thrown at you in life, I feel like it's kind of like a silver lining, or kind of like a light at the end of the tunnel if you see it through, instead of stopping halfway. And I think for most people like to kind of just not go through the toughness of a loss, and rather stick to the comfortability of being kind of present in that kind of time space, or in terms of, even if it's just like a job or something, not losing someone, it's the comfortability of a paycheck week to week, and people don't want to leave that to chase what they really want. It's kind of like stuff like that.
Yeah, well, it was what you were saying at the start, Ali. It's that loss at the start, right? Because that's what it is. That's a currency exchange. So you have to exchange. You have to lose something in order to gain something. It's just that kind of equivalent exchange. It's, if you lose something, you will gain something, but you have to lose something first. But a lot of people, they're struck with fear because they don't want to lose anything. Whether it's, and of course, no one wants to lose someone that they love, or no one wants to lose a relationship that they hold dear. That happens, and like you're saying, often the world changes you. But also, there's plenty of stuff that you could pay the price for, and then you get change in return, but it's fear regardless. So regardless if it's you being proactive and either trying to better yourself or move forward in your life, so you want to exchange something in your past or something that has happened to you or anything like that, or it's the world doing it for you. But I think either way, just the way wired naturally. Humans don't like to do stuff that makes them anxious. They don't like to kind of push that barrier in terms of safety versus fear and versus danger and all of that. But I think it's something that you truly need to wrap your head around, because, and I like to describe it, and I've described it a few ways like this. It's the whole idea that steel is forged through fire. So you can't be strong, or you can't want to be strong without understanding that you need to get burnt. You need to go through a bit of pain. That's the balance, right? So you got to understand that. But if you don't understand, then that's where people kind of hesitate a lot at the very start, which is the loss. But you need to understand that that's just the way of the world. Like you're saying, I think you described it really beautiful. It was very poetic in terms of you have to pay that price, and it's so sad when if you pay the price and you don't see it through, like you're saying, if you don't actually get the exchange, you've just paid the price, and you're left broke. You're left kind of missing part of yourself, which you haven't decided to fill with something else, because you just think, oh, this sucks. I'm not going to move forward, or I'm not going to do anything with what I like, the opportunity that could present itself, that silver lining.
Yeah, and if we take, I guess, what you're saying and connect it with Hendry's, I guess, metaphor of like that hope at the end of the tunnel that can come through acknowledging the actual loss, can we say then that avoiding loss also avoids hope as well? Because if the only way to get to the other side is through, then if we never acknowledge that the fact that we do have to go through to the tunnel and actually go through the process of, grieving the loss, or actually acknowledging the loss and engaging with it, then perhaps by avoiding the ugly truth of what's happened, we also rob ourselves of the potential for hope, because it's only when we do kind of stare down the difficulties that we've engaged with, or the hardships that have been enforced upon us, right, by the world, or by people leaving our lives that we didn't, want them to. But maybe it's only once we fully understand that process that we can even begin hoping. And everyone wants hope, but no one wants to acknowledge the damage. But maybe it's only once we do acknowledge the damage that we can even begin to hope, which is the first step in healing anyway. You need to have some sort of hope. And if your future that you envision, taking it back to the very start when I was explaining the topic, when the future we envision is taken away from us, the one thing we need is hope. Because suddenly you don't have a connection to your future anymore. You don't have a reason to exist, because the hopes and dreams you have for the future is what pushes us forward. So when this destructive force comes into your life and forces that loss, well, perhaps it's the only way to reconnect with our future is to acknowledge it, so that we can have some hope that things can change for the better.
Yeah, and I love it. So, and I think you've hit it spot on, because as soon as, like you're saying, as soon as you're disconnected from something, as soon as you've gone through that loss, right, you can't, people get so caught up then in the flames, they can't see past it. They can only kind of see smoke. And then that's when, like you're saying, you can't connect anything with your future, because your whole life has just been ripped apart. So what do you have? Like you're saying, all you have is this feeling or this experience, however we want to define hope. And that's saying, well, look, something bad has happened, but things happen for a reason, so and so. So I need to hold on a bit. I can't just like let go of everything. I need to hope that down the track, this loss meant something, or this loss could mean something in the future. It's not just shut. Like there's still more that come out of my life. And I think that very first step that you're talking about and that you just linked, I think that's something that everyone needs to get a hold of, because you truly can't appreciate what you've talked about in a previous episode, right? In terms of numbing yourself so much to kind of pleasure and numbing yourself so much to experience. But I truly believe you can't actually appreciate the sunny days if you don't have the shadows around it to define those sunny days. So you can't ever truly appreciate what it's like being around your family or being around your friends if you haven't experienced loss in some way. And whether that's just losing a relationship that meant something to you or losing a person, but you truly can't sit back and say, I want to hold on to this with everything that I got until you lose it. And it's the common story where you can take relationships or of people or anything, but a lot of cases when someone loses someone and they go through that loss, then they go, wow, why didn't I hold on to it in the moment? But you're not thinking about that. You're just thinking you have your entire life. You're just thinking, it's all sweet. I don't need to put in the effort towards my family. I don't need to put in the effort towards my girlfriend. I don't need to put the effort towards the people in my life because they're always going to be there. But they're not. And when they're taken away, then that's only when you sit back and go, wow, like I screwed up. I should have been appreciating the roses a lot earlier but I've lost it now. So then you're just in that position. And that's another unfortunate position that everyone finds themselves in. They can only appreciate it once they've lost it. So it's just so sad if you can kind of cultivate understanding, well, that's how that exchange works. That's how life works. You need to lose something to gain something. If you understand that process, then I think you can kind of trigger yourself more in the moment to say, hang on, if I lost this, it'd be devastating. So let's appreciate it at the same time. And I think that's another kind of insight to it that people overlook always.
I guess the way you can see it is kind of like, think of it as like a building, right? And part of that building gets destroyed. Like that is kind of an opportunity for change, opportunity to grow, an opportunity to kind of do something different with it. And I guess that's the way I see it. So like, let's say your room kind of like part of like a room that you had gets destroyed. You can either block it up in your life, or you can kind of change that damaged structure into something different. That's
kind
of like
refurbish.
Renovate.
Yeah,
is what I was looking
renovate.
for.
I couldn't think of the word. It was stuff like that.
And that's a good point, because you can sit with this broken building, but what doesn't change is that the building's broken. So you've already paid that price, and you might as well get something out of it. You might as well benefit in some way. And it's a crappy thing that you have to even pay this exchange. Like in a perfect world, we could all just grow and be wise old individuals without having to go through any hardship, but that's just not really how things play out. So if you've already, created this immaculate apartment building, and then suddenly a fire burns half of it, instead of leaving the burnt walls and everything there and trying to live within that damaged environment, try to actually, yes, mourn the damage, mourn the loss that's happened, but also instead of stopping there, the damage is done. So there's nothing but going up from that, right? Like it's either continue to live in this damaged apartment, or fix it and make something better than what was there. And you can learn from like the issues. Like maybe, the drapes were too close to the stove, and that's what started the fire in the first place. But now you can learn, as you were saying, Luke, you can actually evolve around that trauma, around that challenge, make yourself better. And then the next time around, that fire's not going to even happen in the first place. And you have a better apartment. So it's like a win-win situation. So, or not win-win, but like you've lost.
You've made the best.
You've already lost.
Exchange.
You've already lost. So the only thing left to do is win. So you've already lost. You might as well take that loss and win from it, because you can't lose and then lose again. Like you've already lost. And then like it's not like half your apartment burnt down and then like suddenly the other half does as well, and like you have no house. Like the damage that happens is like done. Like it doesn't like rekindle. Like when you go through a trauma, it's like that damage inflicted on your life is complete. So now, yes, that might continue to haunt you. Even though it's complete, it might persist, but that doesn't mean you can't, try at least in some way to make a positive situation out of it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Prometheus podcast, where we aim to bring the fire back to the people.